theories that her sister Annie Guthrie, brother-in-law Tommaso Cioni, or brother Cameron Guthrie had been involved.
They threatened to kill Nancy Guthrie. We had not heard that until now. We always knew that there was a consequence threatened if you don't pay by Thursday. Then by Monday, there's a second deadline, and the consequence is that the money goes up, I think, to $6 million. But we never heard that the other consequence was that they threatened to kill Nancy Guthrie.
News Nation exclusive on the search for Nancy Guthrie. It's been over 2 months since she went missing, and despite all the national attention, we still have no idea what happened to her or where she might be.
The press conferences started happening in the interviews with Nanos. What were you thinking?
Shut your mouth. Stop talking. That's pretty much what we were all saying. Why is he out there?
Yesterday, TMZ reported activity in a Bitcoin account connected to a ransom note. The FBI says it is investigating multiple possible ransom notes, demanding Bitcoin as part of the search for Nancy Guthrie.
Tied to that Bitcoin account related to those potentially ransom demands.
TMZ is saying that it's received a new note demanding 1 Bitcoin, which is about $68,000, in exchange for the name of the individual involved in Guthrie's disappearance. This is now the 3rd note in the case, and the demands for Bitcoin payments are raising questions.
Bitcoin was invented.
Bitcoin.
The world was fed a story designed to terrify, that Nancy Guthrie had vanished at the hands of a phantom, a masked intruder slipping through the Tucson night, a professional kidnapper emerging from the desert and disappearing without a trace. As sirens cut through the silence and search teams flooded the Catalina foothills, every eye was turned outward, searching for a stranger who never existed. Because while the chaos unfolded beyond the gates, the real danger had already been inside the home all along, seated comfortably at the same table, hidden behind the illusion of family. This was never a random act, never a crime of chance. It was deliberate, calculated, and executed with chilling precision. A betrayal engineered from within. The kind of crime that doesn't begin with force, but with access. Every layer of Nancy's security had already been compromised before that night even began. The entry points, the alarm overrides, the most intimate details of her routine, even her medical condition, were not hacked or stolen, they were handed over. The source of that information was the one person she trusted without question, her daughter, Annie Guthrie. And when the moment came, the plan was carried out with ruthless efficiency by her son-in-law, Tommaso Cioni, moving with the discipline and timing of a trained operative executing a rehearsed mission. They believed they had designed something flawless. Cameras were disabled at precisely the right moment, security systems went dark without resistance, and the financial trail was carefully routed through Zurich, concealed behind layers of blockchain transactions they assumed were untraceable. Every detail suggested control. Every step suggested they were untouchable. But perfection, no matter how carefully constructed, always carries a weakness. And in their case, it came down to something so small it almost went unnoticed. A single Bitcoin transaction worth $152. That one mistake changed everything. What they thought was invisible became the thread investigators began to pull, slowly unraveling the entire operation. The same technology they relied on to disappear became the very tool that exposed them. A digital pulse, faint but persistent, leading analysts step by step from anonymous code to real-world identity. And as that trail sharpened, the illusion of an outside abductor began to collapse. To understand how it all happened, investigators traced the timeline back to the exact moment everything shifted. February 1st, 2026. The neighborhood was still, undisturbed on the surface, but beneath that calm, signals were already in motion. At exactly 1:44 a.m., just 3 minutes before the Guthrie residence was plunged into total darkness, a critical event occurred. A 7-minute encrypted call was placed, a digital handshake that would later become one of the most important pieces of evidence in the case. Federal analysts examined the signal, expecting to uncover connections to an external network or a disposable burner phone linked to organized crime. Instead, what they found was far more incriminating. The signal originated from a device located precisely within the GPS coordinates of Tommaso Cioni's vehicle. This was not coincidence. It was confirmation. That call acted as a trigger, a final check to ensure the target was alone, vulnerable, and exactly where she was expected to be. Within moments, motion sensors were suppressed, security systems neutralized, and the path into the house cleared with seamless coordination. This level of timing wasn't guesswork. It was knowledge. The kind of knowledge only an insider could possess. Because outsiders hesitate. Insiders execute. Just 3 minutes later, a masked figure appeared on the doorbell camera. There was no uncertainty in their movement, no hesitation at the entry point, no wasted motion. They didn't struggle with locks or search for access. They moved with absolute confidence, like someone who had walked those halls before, someone who understood the layout not from observation, but from experience. Every step was deliberate, every action precise. They knew exactly which lines to cut to blind the system, exactly how to shut the house down without triggering resistance. This wasn't a break-in. It was an entry facilitated from within. And while the public continued searching for a stranger, the evidence was already telling a different story, quietly pointing investigators toward a name that kept resurfacing, Tommaso. But even as suspicion grew, there was one witness that stood above all others, one source of truth that could not be silenced, altered, or erased. It wasn't outside the house. It was inside Nancy herself. Nancy Guthrie lived with a pacemaker, a device designed to regulate her heart. But on that night, it became something far more powerful, a silent recorder of terror. While the perpetrators focused on disabling cameras and wiping external evidence, they overlooked the one system they could never reach. Nancy's own heart was documenting everything, converting fear, struggle, and trauma into precise digital data. At exactly 1:47 a.m., the moment the house went dark, the pacemaker recorded a sudden and violent spike. Her heart rate surged into extreme distress, far beyond a normal fear response. This was not panic. This was sustained physiological trauma. A measurable, undeniable record of terror in its purest form. And it didn't stop after a few seconds. It continued. 4:41 agonizing minutes. For nearly 3/4 of an hour, Nancy fought for her life inside her own home. Every second of that struggle was captured in clinical detail, revealing a body pushed beyond its limits, refusing to give in. This was not a quick abduction. This was resistance. This was survival against overwhelming force. And then, at 2:28 a.m., the data stopped. Not gradually. Completely. That moment aligned exactly with the point she was forced into a vehicle and taken away, marking the end of the struggle inside the house and the beginning of a disappearance that would shock the nation. What remained behind was not just silence, but a complete biological timeline, one that no defense could challenge, no narrative could rewrite. It was proof. Proof that what happened that night was not random, not external, and not misunderstood. It was personal. And as investigators continued to dig deeper, the motive became impossible to ignore. This wasn't about ransom alone. It wasn't about opportunity. It was about desperation. Behind the polished image of Tommaso Ciani was a man drowning in financial collapse, entangled in a multi-million-dollar web of embezzlement, illegal loans, and hidden transactions that were on the verge of exposure. At the center of it all was a covert operation he had built in secret, Project Helix. Project Helix was not just a scheme. It was a system, carefully designed to siphon money from the Guthrie estate into offshore accounts in Zurich, masking the flow of funds through layers of authorization and deception. It funded a lifestyle that appeared legitimate on the surface but was entirely built on fraud. And for a time, it worked. Until Nancy discovered the truth. Just 48 hours before her disappearance, she identified irregularities and initiated an internal audit. What seemed like a routine financial review was, in reality, the beginning of the end. Within 2 days, she would have exposed everything, stripped Tommaso of his power of attorney, and dismantled the entire operation. In that moment, she stopped being family. She became a liability. And in the logic of desperation, liabilities are eliminated. Still believing they were untouchable, Tommaso and Annie placed their faith in technology, convinced that Bitcoin provided absolute anonymity, that a digital wallet address could function as an impenetrable shield. But they misunderstood the system. Because blockchain does not erase, it records. And on February 11th, the FBI's cyber division used that fact against them, executing a precise dusting operation by sending exactly $152 to the ransom wallet. It looked insignificant, but it was a trap. A digital marker designed to track movement, to expose behavior, to turn invisibility into visibility. And when Tommaso moved that money, attempting to wash it through multiple wallets, he unknowingly revealed everything. Every transfer was tracked in real time, every step mapped, every attempt to hide becoming another point of exposure. Because the system they trusted doesn't forget. And this time, it didn't forgive. What looked like a simple transfer of money was never just currency. It was a forensic trigger, a microscopic probe designed to expose movement. And Tommaso, driven by a dangerous mix of arrogance and desperation, walked straight into it. Believing he was still in control, he attempted to move the $152 through a chain of hot wallets, layering transactions in an effort to wash the trail clean. But this time, he wasn't operating in the shadows. Every move was being watched, mapped, and recorded in real time by advanced tracking systems built for exactly this purpose. Because the blockchain doesn't hesitate, it doesn't lose focus, it simply records. The ledger doesn't blink. And that trail led exactly where investigators needed it to go. It didn't disappear into some unreachable network or vanish into digital noise. It led directly to a centralized exchange, a place where anonymity ends. Under strict Know Your Customer regulations, the platform was required to verify identity, to attach real-world credentials to digital activity. When federal agents followed the transaction to its endpoint, they didn't find a phantom, a cartel intermediary, or a fabricated identity. What they found was undeniable. A verified government ID. A biometric facial scan. A name that could no longer hide behind encrypted code, Tommaso Ciani. That single $152 transaction became more than evidence. It became a restraint. A digital handcuff locking him to the crime, bridging the gap between an anonymous ransom demand and a real, traceable financial life. The very tool he trusted to protect him had become the mechanism of his exposure. But while Tommaso managed the execution, Annie Guthrie played a role far more unsettling, the face of grief. For 75 days, she stood before cameras, her voice trembling, her eyes searching, pleading with the public for her mother's safe return. She became the image of loss, the symbol of a daughter desperate for answers. And the world believed her. Until the data told a different story. Because Annie was never on the outside of this crime. She was at its center. She was the architect behind the access, the one who provided the intelligence no outsider could ever obtain. The security passwords, the internal routines, the medical schedules, even the precise 12-minute window when the house was most vulnerable, all of it came from her. This wasn't chance. This was design. And then came the leak that shattered the illusion completely. A recorded call at 2:18 a.m. where a third voice emerged. A woman's voice, unsteady, conflicted, but undeniably involved, whispering words that revealed far more than intended. You promised this wouldn't go this far. Those words changed everything. Behavioral analysts later examined the recording in detail, comparing vocal patterns, cadence, and stress markers. The result was clear and deeply incriminating. The voice matched Annie Guthrie with striking accuracy. It pointed to a plan that may have begun as containment, an attempt to silence Nancy, to stop the audit, to protect the fragile empire they had built together. But somewhere in that plan, something shifted. Control was lost. And what was meant to contain became something far darker. Something irreversible. And Annie's silence in the 75 days that followed took on a new meaning. It was no longer seen as grief, but as awareness. The quiet of someone who knows exactly what happened. Someone who can still trace the route of that black SUV as it disappeared into the desert that night. Someone who isn't searching for answers, because she already has them. By the 75th day, the idea of an inside job was no longer speculation. It was fact, supported by a structure of evidence that could not be dismantled. The Department of Justice had built a case in 3 unbreakable layers. The first was physical. The 1:44 a.m. signal traced directly to Tommaso's location, placing him at the center of the operation. The second was biological, the 41-minute record from Nancy's pacemaker, capturing her final struggle in precise detail. The third was digital, the $152 Bitcoin transaction that stripped away anonymity and revealed identity. Each layer stood on its own. Together, they formed a system of proof that left no room for doubt. And with every attempt to escape, the case only grew stronger. Every transaction moved, every message sent, every attempt to manipulate the narrative added another link to the chain tightening around them. The FBI didn't need to intervene immediately. They observed, they collected, they allowed the Cyones to continue, knowing that every step would bring them closer to exposure. Informant leaks sent to media outlets, digital movements across financial networks, all of it was quietly gathered, preserved as evidence. Tommaso and Annie believed they were ahead, that they could maintain the illusion, embracing family in public, standing beside figures like Savannah Guthrie, all while holding the hidden mechanics of the crime just out of sight. They believed they could move millions offshore while performing grief for the world. But the illusion was already breaking. In the extended version of that 2:18 a.m. call, one final exchange echoes with chilling clarity. Annie's voice, strained and uncertain, asking the question that revealed everything, "What if they find out?" And Tommaso, calm, dismissive, confident in a way that only deepens the weight of what followed, replying, "They won't. She doesn't know enough." He was wrong. Nancy Guthrie knew exactly what he was doing. She uncovered the truth, piece by piece, and she came dangerously close to exposing it all. That knowledge made her a target, and it cost her everything. But even in the face of that, her story didn't disappear, because her heart kept beating long enough to record the truth. And now, that truth is impossible to erase, impossible to silence, and impossible to ignore. What comes next will go even deeper, revealing the final words Nancy spoke before everything went dark, words that may redefine everything we thought we understood about this case. The story is not over. The truth is still unfolding. And now, the pursuit of justice is no longer a question. It has already begun.